Do you remember when we were in New Orleans?
Hey, oh,
And
yes.
man, like that is one hell of a magical city, especially for people sensitive to the dead, as it were.
hmm
I remember getting off the airplane when it was negative 20 Fahrenheit and snowing in the city I was living at the time, and landing and it being 80 Fahrenheit and like sunny.
hmm
And so I stepped out and I'm like, why am I knee deep in Ocean of the Dead? What the fuck is going on?
It's that below the sea level, right?
Yeah.
And as with anyone sensitive to the dead, as our mentors had even warned us prior to us setting foot in, the beautiful city that it is,
Hmm.
there's going to be a lot of dead people everywhere, and you got to know how to clean where you are. And we had a gorgeous Airbnb. It was you, me, and two other mutual friends of ours.
Hmm.
All three of our mutual friends, and we pretty much immediately started really feeling the kind of like what do you want to call it, like dead sickness, ancestor sickness,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just like, oh, ghosts. Yeah.
Yeah, ghost sickness, just heavy, 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 heavy. Especially with the people there being, mediums for the dead. It's like,
Mm.
ooh, we gotta be careful. We gotta close off, which we'll be talking about what we did today, as well as many other techniques for just kind of, keeping the dead in the land of the dead and keeping us in the land of the living.
Because that's like so much of house magic, right? I
Right.
mean, yes, we can talk about prosperity, and I'm sure, we'll touch on that a little bit, but that's really another episode. Today we're talking about cleansing, like keeping things calm and clean and
Hmm.
refreshed. And one of the main things that can disturb the kind of sanctity of the cleanliness of your home can be very much ambient dead. So this is really going to be an episode entirely dedicated to how best to, we talked a lot about bringing in luck and fortune and good blessings. How do you keep them when your house is alright? How do you ensure that they're always flowing because where you are is clean?
Yeah, absolutely. For everyone listening, I highly recommend going back and listening to our episode Spiritual Hygiene and Sympathetic Magic that Saul took the lead on before. This is sort of a spiritual successor, a part two, if you will, to that arcana. And just really reiterating how important it is to be in right relationship with the spirits who surround you by nature and also happen to surround you just by nature of doing magic in an environment.
hmm
Hmm. Yeah. So without further ado, let's get right into the thing.
Be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Svinga Salt and banishing the ambient dead key. Uh, Largely, as you guys will soon hear, with coffee filters.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is especially funny because you're such a coffee nerd.
Yeah, it's very true. For those listening, I am a specialty coffee nerd. Hung out with coffee importers and competition baristas my entire young adulthood. So serenade me with the good shit. Single origin Rwandan stuff is my favorite, so hit me up. PO box forthcoming.
Yeah. You were telling me about the Kenyan coffee that tastes really fruity.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to give it a try. Well, actually, Salt and you're also someone who enjoys coffee. And out of the three of us, I'm famously the one that doesn't actually drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of tea. But I'm getting into it. Like never quite too late, right? Like I'm slowly learning to appreciate its notes, largely thanks to an Ethiopian coffee ceremony I got to attend, which just rocked my world.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that ceremony was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I remember like it's become like an initiation for me is like when people visit where I live, like I gotta take them there. And of course when Salt came out, I was like, you have to witness this. And it was worth it, right?
Mm,
Like the every piece of it was just beautiful.
yeah, shout out to Mohammed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shout outs to Mohammed of Ethiopian House.
Yeah, you get it.
You get it. And if you want to join in all the specialty coffee talk, as well as all the other kind of magic and hobbies and memes and movies and crazy group projects we have going on, check us out at patreon.com/the Frightful Howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for you, our patrons, a Discord server where we have all these awesome discussions happening, including people have set up like a scrying channel and a group workings channel where people do magic for each other and scry each other's target photos. We have
Mm.
Salt's Fantastic Almanac. We have a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing, show notes for every episode, and now a whole tier for monthly group spell work from the three of us on your behalf. Also, remember to give us a like, rating, review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you may be listening to us. It helps us fight the demiurge of the algorithm. If you can't support us on Patreon, this is the number one way to help us out. Give us a follow on YouTube. We have one that automatically
Mm.
publishes episodes. Yeah, it really,
Yeah,
really means a lot to
absolutely.
us.
And for those of you who have been going in and time stamping the episodes, thank you.
Yeah,
Shouts to you.
yeah, shout outs to you.
We really fucking appreciate it, and it really helps us get on the map. So, uh, you know, shouts.
Yeah, you know who you are. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Check out our services. Key offers personalized coaching and magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire readings, custom talismans, oils, and tools. I offer bulk and Favamancy readings. Salt's books are closed, but keep an eye out for his monthly astrological almanac on the Patreon. And finally, hit us up on social media. I can be found at Dragon Cunning. Salt is at SaltCNC, and Key is at Barnowl.key. The B is for Barnowl on the Instagram.
that it is. Yeah, and today we are banishing the ambient dead. Just get right into it. This is one of the primary hindrances, interferences, and in some ways blessings that we encounter as magicians in any given location. One of the ubiquitous uh, presences, shall we say, just by nature of lighting candles, burning incense, doing prayers, offerings, what have you, is these shades, these wandering fragments of beings who crave salvation, nourishment, uh, cooling through water, food, salt, whatever it may be. And, we just want to talk today about what these spirits are and how we can both placate them to get them away from us and use them to our advantage should they choose to come a little closer.
Absolutely. I would say that house cleansing is, one of the 101s that everyone kind of gets into when they first start doing magic because obviously you want your area clean. And we will talk a little about later about some ways to do this if you live with roommates, especially roommates that are not necessarily magically inclined.
Mm,
Because one of the benefits of this kind of practice is that it actually can be incorporated into so many like mundane cleaning habits that it can be
word.
you can largely go unnoticed, right? There's a pretty well-known story, and I swear to God, we will do a house spirit episode. We've talked about house spirits a little bit in Q&As and in our extra episodes that we do on book clubs, but really, we will sit down and do a proper episode on them one day. And this will overlap with that, but not obviously be centered on them. But there is this story that I might have mentioned a couple times in the Q&A, which is we have this good friend of ours who lives in a basement apartment, and she has a roommate, right? So she is a practicing magician, initiated a few different things, and her roommate is not. And her roommate is one of those wonderful friends that we've had growing up, that we all know each other very well, the three of us, because she's in a sense like an atheist, like or identified as an atheist for a long time until my friend and I, her roommate and I, were like, we're gonna prove something to you. Hold on. And then we
Mm,
showed her that magic is real and spirits are real, and she was like, took it really well because she was like, you know what? I'm bought and sold 100%. I don't want anything to do with it because
mm,
I don't want to be responsible for that. I already struggle with human interactions
hmm,
and the confusion that can bring. I don't even want to even remotely deal with the spiritual, invisible people side of things that across even the folklore of her own culture, she's from China. She knows is like, yeah, it's I don't even want to fuck with it.
mm.
I have enough ancestral guilt, and I was like, no problem, you got it. But happy to benefit from our juju and happy to seek divinatory consultation and so on. But over time, what ended up happening as they started living together is my friend was doing all the house spirit offerings. Right. And
Right.
set up a little nook in the basement, kind of like one of those like nook windows, right? Where the house spirit shrine was set up right in the middle of the apartment and between their two rooms. And over time, what started happening was because she was the only one refreshing the house spirit, everyone benefited, but the house spirit clearly preferred her. So, for example, whenever there was a water leak, it hit the other person. Whenever
Mm,
there was an issue with the fire alarm, it inconvenienced the other person. Whenever there was like a smoke issue or like an issue with like random infrastructure or pipes and stuff like that, it always affected the other person. And so eventually, I kind of talked to her and I was like, listen, like, you know what would really help if sometimes you were the one to put out a little bowl of rice for that house spirit, or just give them an incense stick,
mm.
which you could have anyway for like good smells. And she was like, you know what, you're fucking right. And so the moral of that story is obviously house spirits are going to play an important role in this, and we'll talk about them shortly. But there is so much you can do to have like a good spiritual hygiene as well as good kind of like sense around juju, especially depending on the kind of environment in which you live and the safety requirements, the ability to kind of like do things unnoticed, and even if your roommate is not fully conscious of this, making a good floor wash is just looks like making a floor wash. You're just
Mhm.
cleaning, you're just mopping. It does not have to look like anything intense. And a lot of the kind of talismans that we're going to talk about that you can put up on your walls honestly look just like decorations. Like when I was
Yeah.
traveling, I spent a whole summer in the States once, on like a program that I was on. I lived with three other girls. We were all like in our early 20s. Like I was 20, they were 21, and so on. And what ended up happening was we always looked out. Like we had a great apartment that we were living in, and out of all the other people in the program, because we all had these apartments given to us, it was a fully paid scholarship essentially. We got our lodging covered. We were the luckiest. We got to throw house parties without anyone noticing. We got to have alcohol in without anyone noticing, which was, obviously not part of our deal. And everyone was like, "Wow, like why are we always able to get away with everything? Why are we always the ones finding better deals on stuff, having better discounts?" Like, and I was like in my head, I was like, because I do like Hygromantia prayers in here, that I
Mhm.
pass off as being like Orthodox. Because I had my little icons and I had my little thing and I had my little Cyprian setup, but I was kind of like, don't worry, girls, I'm just super Orthodox. And I guess I got to kind of like pass that way in some
Mm.
ways because it was like it just looked like normal Christian stuff. Like it didn't look anything sorcerous, but and also my prayers, like, who knows what I'm praying, right? But there's definitely ways you can get around it.
Definitely right. And that's one of the main things of the episode today. Like integrating your spirits and integrating your magic, regardless of kind of tradition, into your day-to-day life in a way where you can be talking to your spirits and asking them to provide their blessing and even, receiving it passively without any sort of resistance or any sort of problems.
So to get right into it, I would say one obvious way of like clearing your space is smoke.
Right.
And I think all three of us have traditions that like hugely vouch for the practices of like smoke as a clearing,
Mm,
right? Good smells, good humors, right? They like quite literally create this odoriferous zone in which spirits are withdrawn to and also warded away from, depending on the kind of incense being burned. Speaking of Orthodox, right? Very famously, Orthodox churches practice this ritual of blessing the house, especially at Theophany or at Epiphany.
Mm.
And so you would invite a priest over to your home, set things up for him, and he would go around and actually like bless each and every room. and also, put all his tools by your icon corner and so on, and recite prayers for the family, including pets actually as well. And the holy water is often mixed with basil, which is one of our most protected plants. And I think that it's not a surprise this is occurring on Epiphany, right? This is when Jesus is announced to the world. Also, additional blessings can be performed on Sretanya, which is the meaning of the Lord. This is Old Candlemas, I suppose. It's when quite literally humanity like meets God for the first time physically. And that are presentation of Jesus. So it's these moments that, much like Catholics, I'm aware there's that practice of putting CMB with the 20 and then like 25, for example, on each end. I do this as well, even though I'm not Catholic, because it honestly rocks. And I will happily take that tech. That looks badass. I love having it over my door. And I also love the Dutch version that we talked about with Caspar
Yeah.
in episode 34, where it's actually Catherine, Margaret, and Barbara, as opposed to Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. But either way, uh, it's good to get some smoke in, and you don't have to just wait for an important sync day. You can do this pretty much any day. And I like to do this especially with rose and thyme. Asafoetida, agrimony, eucalyptus, hyssop, and rosemary. Those are like the main ones that I reach for, in addition to using fresh basil dipped in holy water and using that to spurge. I also have a practice of taking a cleansing branch, usually one very local to me. There's a lot of birch where I am, so I take a birch branch or a pine branch, cleansing trees, and dipping them in holy water and beating each of the walls. Like you're literally like when you're beating like a carpet with a broom, and you're like get out,
Yeah.
So you're telling everything that's lingering that's not meant to be there to just get out. You're not telling your spirits, your familiars, your ancestors to leave. You're intentionally addressing anything that could be causing blocks, anything that could be impeding the fortune and wealth trickling in and out of your home, anything at all that could be causing issues to flee from whence they came.
Even like, beyond just malefic spirits or troublesome spirits, it's also going to deal with bad airs, for example, like air that brings sickness. Especially important when you're like somewhere humid, for example, like, it's different categories of air, right? Like mountain air, lake air, all these different kinds of understandings of how, like, especially in humoral medicine, how air impacts our health. And so, like, regular fumigation is also something recommended in respect to that as well, right? It can improve the actual, it's a bit of a weird way to say it, but the health of the air, right? Which is also going to improve our own health at the same time. It's going to cleanse the bad spirits, not as in spiritual creatures, but as in like the actual spirits contained within the air itself.
Yeah.
And like you even see in like the 20th century, right? Like French hospitals recommending rosemary, for example, being burnt in the wards just to clean the air out.
Yeah, it's almost like restoring vital energy, whatever you want to call it, good into the room to create a more hospitable environment for better spirits.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to do regularly on that note is reset the vibe of my house, as it were. And while I'm doing that, I'll just kind of walk through every room with a bundle of herbs, usually either like rosemary or basil or both, dipped in whatever holy water, and I will, go and beat every wall, scrub every window, scrub the floors, even asperge the ceiling. And then as I'm clearing it out, leave a prayer card or an icon or whatever image of whatever spirit patrons that room, and ask them to really lock it down, because ultimately, as much as it's mine, it's kind of theirs.
I think that's actually touches on something else as well when it comes to smoke specifically, is like when the same specific fumigation is burnt over and over in the same place. Tobacco is probably the most obvious suspect here, but frankincense as well. Anything that produces like a lot of smoke, heavy smoke. Afterwards, it can settle, right? And the nature of what's left once it's settled is quite distinct from what happens when it's burnt fresh, especially, you walk into a place that reeks of frankincense, it just feels sanctified in some respects.
Yeah. There's always, it feels like you're in church, right?
Yeah. Whereas with tobacco, like even as a smoker, I'm like, oh, this is turbid, this is heavy, this is this is dim, like it's slowing down, which is obviously quite distinct from its more active effects, right? Um, but I think like these are kind of examples really demonstrate just how effective and influential smoke and fumigation can be in general. When we talk
Mhm.
about atmosphere and how it's going to move spirits, how it's going to impact them, things like that.
Hmm.
Mhm. And like even the psychopharmacological effects of these herbs, like frankincense itself, when you burn it and when you choke out the atmosphere of it with it, will have an antidepressant effect on anyone in the room.
Yeah.
And this kind of euphoric, sweet blend. So it will elevate people. It will force them to elevate in some way. So I think a lot about some of the training of like the Afro-Brazilian traditions of to burn a fumigation like to do fumaçal is to wage war on the air.
Hmm.
And what is that war waged in favor of? Maybe it's peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I think, asafoetida, agrimony, eucalyptus, hyssop,
Hmm.
rosemary, and certainly basil are excellent plants, and many of those are available very easily and cheaply. So good ones to get dried as to burn as incense, good ones to get just to grow in general and to have, and to make into your own aspergilliums.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the easiest things to do when moving into a new house, just sweep out every room with like evergreen branches, and then just
Mm,
burn rosemary and just walk through the house and be like, "Hey, ambient death, this is my house now. Get the fuck out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Be here if you want, if you're gonna help me. Otherwise, go away."
And if you're gonna have them help you, you gotta know how to control them, right? Or have
Right.
some kind of spirit that is able to control them on your behalf. So one of the first things, speaking of which, when getting into a new home, we kind of touched on this a little bit in the episode that we did on the go magic when you're in hotels. But in general, it's setting up your wards and protections and setting up your house spirits. So again, we'll save this for the house spirit episode proper. But if you have one and you know what to do with them and you know how to bring them along with you, especially a new place, um, my chosen technique is leaving a boot out for them, telling them enter this boot or shoe, and I'll see
Mhm.
you later. They don't have to be seen, right? So when you come back and it's heavier, you're like, cool, I'm carrying you, and then I leave it there in my house and my new place where I move in. I'm like, okay, you can come out now, and I turn around, I leave them alone for a little bit so they can get out and have their privacy. But nourishing them and having them be one of your on-point command for other beings of the home is really important. I like to give mine porridge with brown sugar. I like to do a lot of oatmeal. I do a lot of bread with butter, honey. I do a lot of cream and milk offerings. I make crepes and pancakes. That's pretty common as well. And so all these kinds of things, like in Canada, we have a tradition from the French parts of creating of making crepes for Candlemas, and I always make sure that I give my house spirits some. So local
Mhm.
traditions, regional traditions, as well as your own cultural traditions all come into play here. And obviously I tell my spirit when I'm coming, when I'm going, and who's visiting. I have a lot of house guests quite often. And so it's a matter of letting them know, hey, you guys are to expect guests. It's someone's birthday, it's someone is coming by, and making sure that is open to them.
Mhm.
But inviting good spirits into your home in general, besides your own, is also about keeping luck, keeping things fertile, keeping things, able to increase. So I like to sprinkle coins with cologne in the corners of each room. I like
Mhm.
to add little reinforcements to my house words. So, for example, if you have a backyard, you can do the usual, peeing on railroad, spikes and putting them around you. We talked about that in the Lording Over Your Landlords episode number 38. We talked about like fixing yourself to your home and keeping yourself safe from landlords that are attempting to evict you. But you can also refresh these with, again, protective colognes. If you have a home that is not with a backyard, you can use thumbtacks even.
Mhm.
Um, but also, I like to add money, love, and luck drawing things to the corners of my rooms. This includes playing cards that are anointed and doctored. This includes little charms, wards, icons, and so on and so forth. Like I have specifically for me, as an Orthodox, I have in my folk practice, I have a saint responsible for each window. And so you may not see a literal icon of that saint over each window, but I know to whom every window belongs. And I anoint them with different oils as a result of that. And I pray to that saint there, saying, keep this window that faces, let's say, the northwest safe. Let it allow only good things into my life, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the main practices that kind of carries over for me is in each of the four corners of whatever, apartment or house I'm living in, there will be either the four kings from a playing card deck or the four
Hmm.
kings from like a tarot deck that are all anointed with oils and are in a position that are kind of corresponding elementally to the cardinal direction that they lie, and just being like, hey, like watch over this space. Like you have the ultimate dominion when you are working together as a team of four. So let's just make sure that like no weird stuff is happening in here. Because you can just take away your blessing. Should you deem this to be kind of weird and not appropriate for whatever random spirit rolling through, just to be like, hey, I like this place, let me grab the shit. uh and having spirits to tell them no before you're even aware that you need to tell them no is a very
Yeah.
important thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Salts, you've often spoken about like the kind of military metaphor, right? Of having like spirits as deputies over certain aspects of life and having like different spirits be given organizational structures or even having to report to others as generals, right? And I find it to be very helpful in this situation, like what Key was just saying, right? Is like have people have it be their job to like keep certain things out and protected. So it's a bit more automated. So it's not all on you having to like be super explicit and clear with what you give permission to.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, spirit relationships are like human relationships, right? There's always a kind of exchange going on where sometimes you can't be fully aware of everything that's happening around you. And, just like you count on your friends, right, to back you up if someone's causing you issues behind the scenes, even if they're doing that from good intentions or unknowingly, right? Um, Same with spirits. And obviously, spirits can be, they're not human beings. They can be very territorial, they can be very hierarchical sometimes the exact opposite of that. Um,
Hmm.
but when it's suitable, like I think it is one of the ways that can kind of, help keep things stable, help keep things moving smoothly. Um, because at the end of the day, even the best scryers like aren't perfect. There will be things that are missed occasionally, especially things that are passively occurring in the background that you're not like focusing your attention on. Like those are the kinds of things that can catch you out and be a slip up. So having spirits kind of take on those responsibilities, observing them, making sure like if this is left unsettled that they can deal with it. Is always good practice, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think also like having those roles kind of assigned, having it framed in terms of responsibility and hierarchy helps other spirits actually respect it when those others are interceding as well on their behalf. I think that's also a key point as well when it comes to these kinds of things.
Hmm. Totally. And I think with that, obviously, the role that you can play can be a very literal physical one, right? I always recommend throwing out your old things. Marie Kondo that shit, honestly. Like, if it does not spark joy, get it out of there. And make sure everything physically smells clean. Like, Salt was talking a little bit before about the little humoral aspect of it. It cannot be understated how much that is important. If you have trash around, if you have messes and stuff like that, like, that drives me crazy. And it really, really helps for me. And it's not just because like I'm particularly a neat freak. It's because it drives my spirits crazy because they're just like, like what's that? And then I'm like, you're right, that could be fixed. And one of the things that we do together is really making sure that like it doesn't have to be like perfectly, perfectly spotless, but at the very least, it's a sense of like domesticity and being a good like housekeeper and a good hostess for me when I have friends over. It's the same thing for spirits. I want to make sure that I present my court well, that it's not like littered and stuff like that. And so one thing that I like to do is making sure again, old things are thrown out, things are where they need to be, messes are contained, and so on and so forth, right? So like if you're someone who gets a little bit overwhelmed because of like stuff piling up, one thing you can do if you are kind of struggling to let go of some things is see it as a kind of ceremony, right? To be like, I appreciate what you did for me. I appreciate what you presented for me. I appreciate all the things that you brought into my life, and now it's time for you to go bring those things elsewhere, or go
Mhm.
on a little journey and so on. It's very Marie Kondo, but like to me, I speak to everything animistically, including obviously all inanimate objects, so this actually does help
Mhm.
me. But I even like if I'm throwing out old 7-day jar candles, like I'll put a coin and like a penny and like a little bit of Florida water inside, something that an old
Mhm.
spiritist friend of mine taught me, and just like put it directly into the recycling, for example, or on the curb or that kind of thing, and be like, a little thank you to the spirits that made that work for me. So things that I throw out, like old clothes, for example, when I want to donate them, I give them a small spritz of like a spiritual cologne just so they can bring blessings to the person who inherits them when I, give them to a Goodwill, for example. And
Right.
so when we talk about like physically throwing out old or unwanted things, it's not just like like there's a cleansing aspect to it. And I think key, because you and I are also initiated into Kimbanda, we know a lot about the medicine of Gangas, of these spirits that linger in places that what is sacred to them is also trash heaps, because
Mhm.
why are they doctor? Why are they sorcerer? Why is that Ganga? Because they take what you don't need to be there anymore and put it elsewhere. And like
Right.
imagine if there was no garbage service where you live. Like imagine within a week you'd be in ruins, right? So this is an incredibly important and very powerful group of spirits that are able to do a lot more than just that, but like that is one of their known locations. And so it's one of those things that, there's sacredness to trash for sure. Don't feel like, yes, there's a lot of traditions that will tell you, okay, dispose of this offering at a crossroads and so on and so forth. But like 9 times out of 10, especially if you're in your own home, the compost is fine. And so whether you're giving
Mhm.
things away or putting them out, don't let clutter become a thing, and don't become too materialist with your materia, right? It's something we talked
Mhm.
about a few different episodes, but make sure that there's always a meaning to what you have as opposed to a justification, just have more stuff. Um, and because one thing that I think all three of us across our traditions know pretty well is that clutter, especially excessive clutter, does bring in ambient dead, does bring in parasites, right? Anything that's disorganized or that has kind of like negative emotional weight to it brings in parasites and ambient dead.
There's also, when we're talking about like throwing things out, for example, there's also, choosing, throwing material out specifically, right? Like, for example, using beans or elderberries as representing like undesirable influences and casting them out of the household, right? Placing them somewhere in a river or somewhere else where they're going to potentially grow or sprout down the line, as turning misfortune into fortune. I want to give another method later on to give a bit more detail on that, but like I think that's another area where the physical act of throwing something out, it doesn't have to be just in terms of belongings or clutter, for example, but also like things that are representative and sympathetic with certain qualities you don't want within the house, or within one's life as well.
hmm That's a really interesting technique. I really like that. So like naming beans or elderberries or these like particular objects as undesirable influences and then casting them out.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good.
I know we're going to talk about the kitchen and the hearth later, but one of the main methods I have in particular is discarding burnt breadcrumbs from a burnt loaf of bread,
hmm
um, and then sweeping it with a broom that has lemon juice and why lemon juice on it. We'll talk about that later, but
hmm
that's one of the methods I found probably most effective. There's also inverse of that to build on what Key was saying, actually, scattering breadcrumbs that have been taken from bread baked for like a feast day or some other day of observance, and then taking those breadcrumbs and offering them to local spirits, for example, attaining merits. The merits of that worship, right? Because now they're participating in that worship of that saint or that spirit, which is obviously a very pleasant and nice thing. So,
Totally. On the theme of ambient dead, right? I think having a central hub of offerings for the inevitable ambient spirits that will come to refresh themselves and then leave, very importantly, is great. This is a good thing to have by your door, somewhere near the front door area or on your porch if you're lucky to have one, is just something to be like, listen, I'm a magician. I have tons of shit going on here. I got lots of offerings going. I got lots of spirits coming in and out. I have messenger spirits going through the windows at all times, giving me updates on things. I know it looks like my house, out of this entire block of houses, is like glowing in radiation colors, compared to everyone else. And I know you're gonna be attracted to that. It's a little bit like moths to a flame. So if you're gonna take something, take this, and then don't take anything more. Many traditions I practice have practices in which when you're making a significant offering, you give a crumb or just a little something something to the floor or to, let's say, the door or something like that, just for the ambient spirits to be like, if you're gonna take something, take this, but then you can take no more, right? Like this is the limit. It's kind of like practices that we have. In Serbia, for example, of putting nettles up in the roof to be like, listen, nettle stings. What else stings? Lightning. And so we say that nettle is associated with Perun, or Ilya Gromovnik, right? So Perun, the old Slavic deity, and Elijah the Thunderer, the saint that is syncretized with him, celebrated on August 2nd. And we say, lightning doesn't strike nettles twice because nettle already stings like lightning. And so if you have nettle in your roof, lightning will not hit your house because it's already been stung once by the same thing. And so with that logic, right, if they've already eaten once, they are not allowed more because they've had their taste. They can claim and they can beg like, oh, but I needed some too. Great, they had their thing, right? Just giving them a little prevents them from taking more. So having some kind of central hub for offerings, even just little pieces by the front door, I think is really good. And Key obviously is a fan of the coffee at the windows technique for settling the dead because coffee is also curative.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the coffee trick. And I apply it very liberally as a coffee enjoyer.
Mhm.
But really, yeah, one of the things to think about while doing that is to position them strategically, where things can enter the home. So as much as this is doors and windows, these can even be like the weird spots in the basement where air happens to come in because that's going to be a hole in the ground. That is where the dead are going to show up. So leaving out a little cup of coffee, maybe a glass of water or like strong clear alcohol in that location can do a lot to cut them off. Just to be like, hey, here's an offering for you. You don't need to get any of the other things that are in my house that look tasty. And also the properties of this are conjured such that it will make you go away once you've taken it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even little espresso shots like are great for
Right.
that. Or like actual, I mean, it does literally help with smells, right? It does have like a very physical effect of helping neutralize smells. Like, smelling coffee grounds when you're trying to go between smelling other kinds of things.
Mhm.
But like actual coffee grounds and coffee filters at like windows can really help with air control, as it were, with spirits.
Definitely. I think as well that just being aware of the rituals that you're performing, like the kind of magic you're doing, that sometimes some works are better done outside or away from the household in general. There's speaking of like, giving offerings, for example, for Qingmingjie, we have the way I was taught to make offerings to the ancestors during the festival is it's not done at the home, at least the method I was taught. You go to the crossroads and an ingot is given to the local spirits first to make sure, hey, look, these offerings have to go to the right place, right? Like they've got to go through to the underworld to my ancestors. Um, so you're also kind of bribing the local land god, right? But I think part of that also is like when you're making a big offering for ancestors, you don't want yin spirits to see that and roll up onto the household, right? So I think that's another element that is worth taking into consideration. Obviously, that's not saying you shouldn't offer to your ancestors at home. This is like very specifically like for a big burning offering with a bunch of paper houses, ingots, everything. But I think that's something to be aware of when we're kind of dealing with this stuff, right? Is knowing what's going to draw the ambient dead. So like burning hell money inside, for example, or like at the wrong time in the wrong place isn't always great. Like you don't want to use that without kind of discrimination first. Yeah, there's all kinds of situations I think where it's one of those cases where we ideally don't want to rely on our wards. However, when we do need them, we need them, you know.
Absolutely. Which is why I think wards at the front door and back door are essential. So if your house has like a sliding door into a basement, a kind of backyard, or any kind of back door, making sure it's equally juiced up as your front door. And we'll talk about doors shortly, but like windows absolutely warded with oil. I think is really important. You know, I like to do a little firewall protection style oil that I have from a friend of mine who's a conjurer, as well as holy oil, and a general protective oil, in the name of my main saint that guards those windows. And then, and for the record, you know, oil for a saint can be as simple as the oil in the lamp that is burning by their icon or by their shrine, right? It has all the prayers ever made to that saint. And then also, you know, specific herbs, right? Like that are guardians, right? So salt, I know you're a big fan of dill growing by the windowsill.
Yeah, I like my Speary boys.
And for that, I also like Espada de Sal Jorge, a snake plant or like mother-in-law's tongue. And I like ferns, ivy, palms, right? Like these are great ones to have in general. Also cacti.
Yeah. The just to throw into the mix, iron plant, Komigalingampoji, which is Dieffenbachia, you know, any number of these Paragum, all good to keep by the windows and just to keep the nonsense out of the house.
Absolutely. And salt, I remember you telling me about ghost magnets.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when you know, there's always gonna be things that are gonna draw ghosts in, right? So like for example, if you have materia, specifically like materia, it tends to be the case for practitioners that has an unsavory origin. Now that could be a black-handled knife that's been used and has the claws, you know, the iron needs to have been used to kill someone, for example.
Yeah.
It can also apply to, let's say, suicide tools, right? Which obviously have always been associated with magical potency. The same with like, you know, yeah, there's a whole lot. We can ask the Tire Johns about this because they're specialists in this kind of material.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, yeah, I think it's also worth identifying those kind of items, and when they're not actively being used in the cultivation of those practices, right? We need to treat them with a lot of caution, with a lot of respect, and we need to, you know, there's a number of ways you can deal with that. If you're not a practitioner, you're probably better off just not having it in the house. But for those of us who do practice, you know, we can seal it off. We can keep it in a box that's filled with fragrant, you know, fumigations and a sign of spirit to keep watch over it. So that if anything, any trouble does come from it, then hey, this is your responsibility. Fix it. That, you know, I think that's one of the things that we do need to be careful of when we are, as you know, when we do deal with risky material, is it's risky for a reason, right? And you don't need to be testing your wards constantly. Like you don't want them, you know, you don't want to be inviting trouble, right? So I think that's kind of one of the things that is worth keeping in mind when we're dealing with that kind of stuff.
Totally. And it's good to have some magic checks and balances. Like, for example, a spray. I love an organic, all-natural cleaning spray that does not harm my sensitive ass skin. You know, straight from wherever else you get those things, you know, Whole Foods or whatever, doctored with juju materia inside, you know, so like a little bit of Van oil, a little bit of hyssop, that kind of thing, you know, just making sure that you can spritz things down, right? You know, I like doctoring colognes. I like making sure that I have holy water on deck that I can add to things, right? You know, bathrooms, right? I think we talked about that in the episode where we discussed like a very recent one, right? On like Magic on the Go. Enchanting on the Go, number 48. It was all about, you know, putting, you know, doctoring your on-the-go soap, right? So like cleansing soaps and your shampoo, laminating that Psalm 51 and putting it right on your shower wall is a good thing. But for floor washes, I've been taught by conjurer friends to do pine sol, especially because pine itself, you know, is obviously associated greatly with cleansing. But pine sol has its own properties, as does ammonia, right? Although being careful with ammonia sometimes, as it can also cleanse out other good forces too, from what I've heard. But I usually use liquid Castile soap as base, and then I'll add rue, rosemary, agrimony, lemongrass, some of my urine, salt, and sometimes a bit of Florida water or Kananga water. Having grown up around a lot of root workers, I just ended up incorporating these techniques into my practice as they were passed on to me. But like a good Psalm 84 sweep of the house with this is going to make sure that things are quite calm.
Hmm.
And I want to hear about this window wash that you were telling us about.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of using. It's pretty simple. Dandelion, John's wort, and also the juice from olives mixed together. Yeah, that's one of my favorites for keeping, making sure that the what's coming through, what's, being reflected through those windows is beneficial for the household. Fortunate for it.
I love that. And of course, it is not a surprise that the kitchen is going to have a lot of action, right? This is where most spirits get fed in the first place. I have my house spirit set up here. I have practices with the window in the kitchen. I have a whole thing where I give a little bit of everything that I make every day to those spirits and so on and so forth, right? And this is also a way to kind of keep out unwanted spirits, is because if you have a lot of protections in your kitchen, the things that to come in there and try and share a meal with you, they will already have one, like I said, at the door, for example. They already have one in the designated area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kitchen is the hub for everything, right, in the house.
Hmm.
And it's, classically speaking, it's the heart of the home. And I think outside of shrine rooms, it's probably the most active space, right?
Absolutely. I like your idea of scattering breadcrumbs from baked bread and communal
Mm-hmm.
meals and so on. Like I make a lot of bread for various Orthodox reasons, and I love to use the leftover crumbs, and also Thursday salt, which is something that we make on Holy Thursday, using rye, flour, and salt. Coarse rock salt until it's black in the oven. We make it every year fresh, and we can add herbs to it depending on the purpose. But the base one is that. There's really, really witchy ones that are quite nasty, involve goat urine and all kinds of other things that I've had to make over the years. Mercifully, not a hard thing for me to get these days. But even so, just like these different kinds of Thursday salts can be sprinkled around to again ward against ambient debt and also to bring in prosperity.
Absolutely, yeah. I found, especially like when we're talking about the kitchen, lemon to be really beneficial for prosperity, and like wealth, for example, but also like health and longevity, right? Because lemon citrus, it's a very long lasting,
Hmm.
relatively speaking, for a fruit. It does take a while to expire compared to others. And it's also something, it's sour, right? It's heated. And in that respect, it's kind of suitable, right? It has sympathy with the kitchen itself. So it is something like if you're looking for, this is less in the subject of house cleansing, how, or is it? But we can stack it all up for abundance, but we can also use it in washes when it comes to the kitchen. That's why when we're sweeping away the burnt bread, right, we put lemon juice on the broom. And that's because lemon has sympathy with the kitchen, has sympathy with the virtues, the heat of that place. And so when we're using it to wash things, we're, not washing away the qualities that we want to retain there. We're not washing away the natural condition of that location, right? So I think that's something quite valuable as a material or, approach to doing that.
Absolutely. And same thing goes with bedrooms, right? This is where I have my anti-nightmare wards. I have plenty of hagstones on white horses' hair tied up over my bed. I have certain wards against general, night demons and so on and so forth. I have ones for increased visions and like prophetic dreams, and so on and so forth. And also, like, I add a little bit of some of these waters that I distill or that I have preserved as a tincture, alcohol base, just a couple of drops in my laundry washing liquid, in order to kind of like give that a boost when I'm refreshing my sheets. Just to protect against evil sleep and psychic intrusions, right?
There's also the consecrated plushie.
There is a consecrated plushie, that is true. Salt may be one that's excellent. It's one of those ones that has like a back that opens, so you can put some things inside it, and he made me an anti-nightmare charm that goes directly into the plushie.
It's necessary.
It's
Yeah.
so necessary, yeah.
The night watchman.
He's got a shift, okay? He's busy. No, I love that thing so much. And I think that in general, keeping good spirit hygiene in your bedroom is really good, because so many, it's like such a vulnerable space, right? It's where you are quite literally vulnerable, lying on your back or your stomach, or whatever like that, and you are entering these transitory states, right, where you're flying out of your body and so on and so forth, right? Like, key, not everyone is the nightmare demon, night demon witch that is causing these problems for other people and actively leaving their body and doing this. Like, some of us are trying to prevent them from coming into our homes.
Oh man. Yeah. Or those alleged to go gallivanting with such things. You can always ask him to pass you by. But yeah, of course, just leaving out any of those things around to keep them away really helps.
Yeah, because we even talked about that in our hagstone episode, right? Is the use of tying hagstones around like the barns, for example,
Hmm.
of animals to prevent things from riding them and exhausting them, and that also includes hags, right? Or these night spirits that can
Hmm.
ride you. Um, and I think the other side of it too, because the bedroom is such a liminal space as it is, it's where you sleep, presumably, it's where you are in this vulnerable state, right, that we were just mentioning. It's also a place where there's a lot of fertility. And you guys know I talk a lot about fertility. It's how I conceive of magic a lot through some of my training. So a lot of the kind of protection rituals about cleansing your house, keeping it safe, involve also kind of securing the fertility of the fact that like your literal energy, whatever you want to call it, your magic, your power regenerates when you sleep.
Hmm.
When you sleep is when your spirits give you messages. It's when you're, letting your spirit bodies become more aligned in their purpose. And so if you're not getting a full night's rest, if you're chronically dealing with like a lack of sleep, that can prevent, or at least the restful sleep, it can prevent your spirits from like adequately kind of realigning you. So it's an important place to secure fertility. And I think obviously marital fertility is a part of that if you share your bed with a partner.
Hmm.
A lot of like Serbian love magic, for example, involves protecting where you sleep so that people can't curse your relationship. So, for example, taking like a bit of hair of your partner and burning it to ash and then putting that in like white silk and keeping it for 3 days under the roof tile of a dog's house, like if your dog has like a house outside, or like anywhere where the dog sleeps, and then sprinkling this over the bed, is said to keep someone loyal like a dog.
Hmm.
Or coating the pillow with honey. Another example for this too is making sure that like you have a tall glass of water, collect it on the new moon, and you add some honey into this and mix it until it blends. And then you put like the petition or like the photograph of the person with the head facing downwards, so they're upside down in the glass, making sure they're completely covered. And then you pour this glass out in front of you on the main dinner table, like getting it all wet, and you tell the honey, because it sweetens everything in the world, you must sweeten the mind of the person towards them. And then you use the same glass with this contents at the head of your bed. Like, so basically, you put it underneath the bed. And then for 9 consecutive um, days at the same time, you put the glass in front of you, you repeat the charm, and then you complete the ritual before the moon is full. And this way, you can see like the bed is where you sleep with your partner, right? But the table is where you eat with them. So it's these two domestic spheres are being
Hmm.
protected by the honey.
I was gonna say really good tech.
hmm Very simple, right? There's like
Mhm.
just similar like divinations that are done like on St. George's Day, for example. Like women can like there's a lot of divinations for like a lover that can be done on St. George's Day. But like one example is like breaking off twigs of a cherry tree, one for each potential suitor. So if a girl has like a few different eligible bachelors in mind, she can place these twigs after naming each of them with like a different ribbon, for example, for each suitor under her bed. In the morning, the first one she reaches for will be the one that she marries. And so there's all kinds of things that can be done with the bed, but the point being is it's a place of fertility. It's a place of needing to make sure that you are gestating and safe. There's pregnancy spells as well, right? Making sure that you're growing in fertility. That can be done here as well.
Mhm.
One pretty well-known one is on the night between the first and second lunar day, right when the new moon is beginning to gain strength again, you go out into the air, open air on the balcony at midnight, you look at the sky and you like bathe your stomach with like various herbal waters collected on Vitus's day and so on, or George's day, any of the big fertility days, and you pray to God um to as the moon grows, that a baby grows in your womb as well. And you're not supposed to leave the bed until the morning. So again, like the bed is the period of gestation that's linked to the moon.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Or even like Kind of just to throw in the playing cards that we're all a big fan of course, the Four of Hearts. You can always stand in for the bed, and you can build other work that needs to increase fertility on top of that, right?
Yeah. It's also just think with like for children, like gender stuff, like there's one like I was taught that like if you want a son, you put a gun or an axe under the bed, which is just so funny to me. Like when you're having sex, 'cause it's just like, yeah, gun or axe. It's like the two genders. And then if you want a daughter, you put like birch, like a
Mm,
birch branch, underneath the bed, or over the bed. So when you're having sex, the birch is over you. Or, for example, you ask the moon for a daughter while lighting a candle and like holding a plum in your hands and putting the plum to your stomach and saying the plum is round, the moon is round, so your daughter is round and beautiful. And if you want a son, you take an apple instead and you say, this is round, the moon is round, so light this way, and you pray to different saints depending on it. So if you want a son, you'd pray to Nicholas or Elijah or Seraphim of Sarov. And if you want a daughter, you'd pray to the Theotokos, Mary, Saint Sophia, Petka, or Fevronia.
mm,
But either way, like all this stuff is to say that fertility is a huge part of the bedroom. Whether even if you're single, it's a huge part of it, because it's where you can dream of futures and partners and destinies, and it's where when you wake up, you'll have the energy actually to be able to go about your day and accomplish your goals. So it's a really important part to ward and protect and to clean. So like, sprinkling cleansing waters and tinctures and certainly tiny, tiny drops of these things in like colognes into your washing machine when you're doing your usual load of laundry,
mhm,
and refreshing your sheets or even just sprinkling the sheets before you go to bed, really good. And I like to keep a glass of water these days next to my bedside table and a little candle, and I pray to my spirits that they trap anything that could be tormenting me in any way when I'm sleeping
mhm.
into that water, and then I throw it out over the outside in the back whenever whenever I'm woken up. And certainly, I know people who like will keep like a 7 day in a big, thing of water by their beds.
Mhm.
I know people who keep all kinds of various mechanisms and witchy things underneath their beds to help them if they're doing a lot of spirit flying, so they can like coalesce and kind of keep that energy in there. They don't have to process it as soon as they wake up. They can actually have time to like have breakfast, go to work, and come back and analyze it later. So you don't have to like spend your whole morning before you go to work like agonizing over omens and divination.
Right.
Um, but that's perhaps for another episode. For now, just to say, keep that place clean and clear and under control.
Yeah, one of the just the last things for the bedroom that I wanted to throw in there is I'm a huge fan of the rosemary and lavender bundled together, kept in abundance around the house. But of course, both these plants being good against the ambient dead while simultaneously drawing in blessings, and just stimulating relaxation, which is kind of a increasing a decrease.
Mhm.
But yeah, one of my favorite combos for it. So
Mm,
plus it goes back to that point of, restful sleep is important so your spirit can coalesce, and both of these things will bring about that rest.
yes, absolutely. And I guess on that topic, hallways you should probably mention because this is where transitions occur. Hallways are also liminal spaces. They're not technically one room or another.
Mhm.
Fun fact for those of you who have like tricky, weird spirits that are like, I need to not see sunlight, and you're like, okay, great, but like there's not really a space where I can keep you completely free of light. Um, Make sure they mean sunlight because or natural light, because hallways are a great place to keep those spirits. Because
Mhm.
usually natural light will not really hit them in a hallway unless the hallway is positioned to see a window from a different door when it's open.
Yeah, yeah. Just being yeah, being careful with that stuff, right? Like the also when certain spirits, if you want their shrines to be exposed to like particular qualities of light, this could be really helpful because if you angle it right, they might only see sunsets or they might only see sunrises.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's good to have in general for like those crossroad spirits, right? Like a tiny little shrines. Like remember, shrines don't have to be big, and they can be very discreet. They can look
Mhm.
very, very like normal. And if you live with roommates, this could just be wall art that you put up, and no one knows it's just a
Mhm.
tiny. Again, I love a 2D image, but like an icon can hide so much behind it.
Exactly, yeah. Like something that I'd done with like roommates as well is just, that weird little card on your desk, that's kept propped up right, that you like
Mm-hmm.
burn, you happen to burn a little cone of incense from time to time in front of. Um, then one of the ones as well that was pretty discreet is I cut a little, X into the wall, and then 100 ingredient powder went into it.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that's there is just kind of watching.
The 100 ingredient powder can be very small,
Mhm.
and a tiny pinch of it is enough.
Exactly right. Like I guess the whole modality of powdering it down is so we don't have to have all these things out and about, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's like, okay, everything that spirit wants now fits in a thimble.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Precisely, precisely.
mhm. If you conjure it correctly, that thimble is the shrine all its own.
Oh,
But perhaps for another day.
I love thimble shrines.
Mhm.
Very, very sacred to Petka.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's there's a lot we can talk about that in our eventual episode. We bring Caspar back on for sewing and weaving.
Mhm. Definitely, yeah. One for the books.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a lot of hallway stuff that I do in general, like, and there's temporary shrines. So like, without naming this particular spirits, you guys who visited me know that like certain months there's a different hallway shrine.
Mhm.
And that's also because I'm refreshing there as on my way out to the door.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's always good to have that like refreshment piece there, something absorptive, right? Whatever that may be it, uh food, a drink, just glass of water, certain even like porous stones kind of kept together and like fed, different alcohols to like purify them from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
because like you have nowhere to go but past it, and the same is true for spirits. So
Mm-hmm.
and, like the images of the magic I've done for people in like the apartment I was in previously, like those who have seen it know that that tiny hallway had layers and layers and layers of juju packed into it just to make sure that things go out and bad things don't come in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. But on that note, let's talk about something very, very important, which is walls and chimneys,
Mhm.
and cleansing them. We have a whole episode on witch bottles. It's episode 31. So if you want to hear about that, check those out. Those are obviously ones that people bury in walls and chimneys, all that kind of thing, right? Um, and in fact, there's an excellent book that I highly recommend called Magical House Protection: The Archaeology of
Mhm.
Counter Witchcraft by Brian Hoggard. It has an excellent chapter on witch bottles that we cited pretty extensively in that episode. And it also contains a lot of other kinds of house juju for protection and for cleansing that comes from largely the British Isles, but also looking into Canada, United States.
Mhm.
So, Salt, I'm sure you're very well familiar with this, but like one thing that the author talks a lot about is concealed shoes. Sh
Mhm.
shoes and chimneys, in walls, under floorboards, in roofs, like, tied up on the rafters, as well as around doors or stairs. Reginald Scott pretty famously says that, spitting on shoes is a way of protecting against witchcraft.
Mhm.
We all know that magic can enter through the shoes very easily. We have to protect our feet. So I like to have a little tiny broom by my door that I sweep my feet with whenever I step over the threshold, just to be like anything I accidentally carried with me may go away.
Mhm.
And I also keep I have a little station next to my front door, which just has like extra deodorant, sunscreen, a lip balm, that kind of thing, where my keys are. And one thing on there is a whole bottle of Florida water because I do love that shit. And I sprinkle it in my feet, like on the soles of my shoes sometimes, just to be like,
Mhm.
one, so that my feet don't smell nasty. Nasty. And two, so that obviously, a little cleansing.
Mhm.
Also, I
Nice.
usually have someone's picture in my feet because I'm
Nasty.
for
Yeah.
domination or whatever. I mean, not usually, but often enough. Uh,
I'll own up to it. There is always something going on in my shoes.
oh my God. Yeah, well, that's kind
Uh,
of on brand for you.
yeah, definitely. But no, with that, like even the doormat, like that itself can be, selected very carefully material wise to happen to be made of plant fibers that rebuke the dead as they come in, or shades and things like that. if you get like a woven like raffia mat or something like that somewhere. But also the amount of things that can just be chalked on the floor forever underneath it.
Yes, 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 totally. There's this movie. We'll talk about Dora in a second, but I just wanted to note there is this movie that we all love, Renfield, with Nick Cage, as Cagula, as Dracula. And at one point he's in Nicholas Hoult, who's playing Renfield's apartment, and he's like, "How the hell did you get inside? I didn't invite you in." And it pans to the front door where it says a welcome mat. And I was joking about that with Salt afterwards, and I'm like, that counts, right? And Salt was like, "Oh my God, it does count."
Mhm. Yeah. It's always the funny thing. I'm like, I don't want a welcome mat that says welcome. I don't want things invited in.
Do not have a very intentionally my mat does not say welcome, it's just a normal mat.
Yeah.
And
I
if you,
saw
if you're forced to have one that says welcome, maybe stick some nails under that.
Wow, rude. That's a
Oh
trap.
yeah, come on in, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was at the store the other day stocking up on like candles and supplies and things, and I saw a doormat that they had that said certain friends and family only welcome. And I'm like, "Man, that's pretty fucking good."
Yeah.
That's
Until
pretty
like
powerful.
yeah, until spirits come in wearing masks and they're like,
Mhm.
"Hello, I'm certain friends and family."
Exactly. And I'm like, okay, here's salt and gunpowder mixed together. Let's have a talk.
Mhm. But speaking of shoes, the shoes have a link to fertility, right? They're used in
Mhm.
terms of conception as well, help women dream of future children. And children's shoes themselves are powerful amulets. You have to keep in mind the context that infant mortality was very high in the past and still is in many parts of the world. So having the shoes of an infant is actually a very powerful charm
Mhm.
at provoking the child to continue to live, right? And of course, I highly recommend protection marks. We will do a whole episode on hexafoils, our
Mhm.
favorite symbol. You put these in the rafters, put these on your door, put these in the walls. They're excellent to protect against fire, much like a satyr square. They're also excellent to protect against lightning,
Mhm.
because they usually belong to thunder deities like Perun. Crosses, pentagrams, all those kinds of things. Keeping, various switch ladders around your windows. I love a good hackstone ladder.
Mhm. One of
Um,
my favorites with those is this is pretty dangerous, so I'm not saying to do this, but I am saying, there's a long tradition of like very intentionally burning a board somewhere in the house very deeply with a candle and being like, okay, the house is burned once, let it not burn again.
But yeah, it's like we were saying earlier, right? The whole thing of like nettle and like it's already been bitten once.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Always a good mode of protection. Just
Mm,
doing the minor version of the thing so the major one doesn't happen.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But so witch bottles, obviously concealed shoes, hexafoils and protection marks, are excellent things to have on the walls in
Mhm.
general. And if you are the kind of person who is in the walls, as always, it's also just good to make sure
Mhm.
you have some spirit that's like monitoring them. In general, I have picked at so many bricks in various places that I've worked and
Mhm.
put charms into the recesses. At some point, if those buildings are ever demolished, you will find my juju there. Some archaeologists will be like doing a little survey and being like, "Oh, how
Mhm.
interesting, signs of witchcraft." And like, it was me.
Yeah.
Mm.
There's there's a lot of just kind of reminded me there's a study that I'll throw in the show notes, but it's a really good archaeological survey of interred animals in
Yes.
walls in like kind of pan-Germanic countries. Some of my favorites being from like southwestern Germany, like on the border with Switzerland. So having cats famously like interred in the walls because they're able to chase away the demons of the prevailing wind.
Well, I was just about to say in Brian Huggard's book, there's a whole section on dried cats,
Mhm.
and dried cat corpses being found on their doorsteps, as well as horse skulls, and certainly chicken feet or rooster feet being
Mhm.
kept over doors because they peck and claw. I think that comes by, roosters are very territorial. And so I like to have crossed rooster feet
Mhm.
over my door or over windows, especially over the kitchen window, to peck away and deter things. These are also really good against gossip to make sure gossip doesn't reach your home, because gossip is an excellent anti-fertility, curse. To
Mhm.
start, literally like spreading and sowing doubt about who you are, your character, your confidence, and so on and so forth. Um,
Yeah.
and I was just thinking about how, all of us at this point carry around this supercomputer in our pockets, right? That can give us access to so much knowledge. We have our smartphones, and yet most of what we use it to consult is gossip and rumors.
Mhm.
And so it's really important to not let that kind of thing, fuck with you. Obviously we're trying to, it's hard to stick to just cleansing and like how to like clear these things, right? Because it's like, okay, there's
Mhm.
so much we could talk about. There's like washes we could dump on the door. If you have like, a Rose of Jericho, for example, and you don't want the water to be sitting there for too long, you don't want it to mold. So people add a little bit of Florida water and some alcohol to it to keep it a little bit
Mhm.
longer for fresh. Our good friend Phoebe Hildegard Finch gave an excellent presentation in 2024 at Virtus Genie Symposium on the Rose of Jericho. And one thing that she was saying there was like, you don't want it to mold, so keep it there for maybe 5 hours tops. But when you finish, you can always either drink the water like a tea. It'll be a little
Mhm.
bitter. I usually drink it. It's fine, honestly, and that's great. Or you could toss it on your doorstep. And so it's nice to refresh the door, for example. I really
Mhm.
like to toss anything, like any water that I have sitting around that's been blessed by a spirit onto the doorstep to refresh it. Because we're talking about cleansing, it's hard not to eventually get into protection.
Right.
But because the maintenance of cleansing is protection. So having things like these claws or certain animal parts there are really good. You mentioned cats. I also, like I said, I'm a big fan of the horse skull. Normally for us, we would keep a horse skull over the apiary to protect the bees. And we would have
Mhm.
other kinds of animals interred in different places. We have a whole practice of keeping a dried toad underneath the doorstep to help with rain magic and fertility of your garden.
Mhm.
Um, and there's certain sacrifice rituals that go along with it that actually are like astonishingly Toadbone-like, as a shout out to our very first episode. But not something I can get into publicly yet, I suppose. Either way, it's definitely interesting stuff. But I would say for the door, right? Red brick dust over the doorstep is a very common one in African
Mhm.
American conjure. I know in Hyatt's materials, this is a very common thing that people would sprinkle over their door for protection as well as salt.
Mhm.
I like to do basil over the door peephole.
Mhm.
So sometimes
Yeah.
I'll like take dried basil over it and then remove it every now and then, or I'll wash the peephole with basil to protect who wants to look inside and also protect my gaze when I look outside.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, One of the things that I used to do is like at my old place, I had a seven of hearts playing card with like this one of the hearts in the middle cut out of it, and then that was where the peephole was.
Oh, that's
So like
cool.
any of the gays had to like pass through the card. And there was like scripture written on the back and you know, repel my enemies, let me see only good things outside, that type of thing.
That's really fucking cool. I might take you up on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Love a good playing card magic.
Mhm. It's always the best.
Hmm.
And then something just to mention cleansing wise, like as important as the door is, especially good for cleansing and something to protect, especially against the nasty, kind of witchier spirits out there, is the hinges.
Yes.
Like pay those special attention as the axes around which the permission to enter or leave the house, revolves.
Mm.
Um, Same too with, it's just a fun little gap to pass through those who have spirit flown and mess around with that tech to see how it works.
Yes, yes, totally. I 100% agree. Hedges are great places for witchy spirits to enter and leave because they don't come through the door necessarily.
Mhm.
So I also like to have a hagstone looped around the doorknob, or some kind of prayer rope as well.
Mhm.
And I also like to have bat nuts hanging someplace, a very common
Mhm.
protection word, right? Especially on a string, or additional hagstone letters and so on and so forth. I have a rosary made entirely out of hagstones, little tiny ones,
Mhm.
that you and I actually bought on an island that's pretty famous for hagstones and their lore in the Adriatic.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Shout outs to that rosary.
Hmm.
But Yeah, also a big fan of yeah, keeping prayer ropes or beaded things or whatever talismans hung over the door, handles themselves, especially if those are consecrated for whatever spirit happens to patron or own that door or is most responsible for its protection.
Yes,
Um
absolutely.
yeah, and something that I me being me, of course, just make sure that like the physical locks and security and things on the door are good. Um
So that people like you don't get in.
exactly, yeah. Like the spirit is not the only thing you have to worry about.
Can I just expose you a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
No, I won't go that deep into it, I promise. But I love that you have a scapular,
Hmm.
that you have like obviously protection saint stuff in,
Hmm.
and you also have your lockpicking tools inside behind them.
Hmm. Yeah, some little escape tools in there and all manner of goodies to get into places where people say I'm not supposed to be. Which shout outs to Ed Calderon over there at Sneak Reaper. Um
Yes, yes, he has an excellent Instagram page, La Santa y el Monje, which is all about Satisma Muerte devotion.
mm,
And it's like a visual catalog of it, and he sells some really cool tactical stuff on his website, Snake Reaper Industries, which includes this like really cool scapular that involves like super double reinforced,
mhm,
um, what's it called? Like the string
mhm,
is so you can actually cut things with it,
mhm.
and
So
it
good.
has like two outward facing pockets and then two inward facing pockets that are like actually completely it's hidden.
Mhm,
But yeah, it's like the cord necklace is actually reinforced for sawing and cutting, so it's good for escape.
mhm. Yeah, not sponsored, just the aesthetics are on point and I fuck with
It's
it.
that the whole aesthetic is so very
Yeah,
you, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh
That's
man.
so funny.
Um, but yeah, keeping anything like that around. Keeping even statuary by the door, is something
Yes.
that I always like. Like just like we said, if there's a specific spirit that patrons that door, having a little thing of them, any of the various door guardians or like door deities themselves, or the spirits that patron them, um,
I love San Deshasador by the door.
yeah, yeah,
Pun intended.
yeah. Yeah, I've got
Eh.
my statue of him and my ever overturned glass of salt water right in front of him with some scissors, just kind of keeping watch over everything.
Hmm.
The oh yeah, the importance of having spirits to set over, especially when the locks are broken. Like I remember when I was working on one particular site and we had an issue with one of the back doors. Nearly every single shift had to go fix the lock. But for a period of about 2 weeks, because that's how long it takes for these doors to get fixed, apparently, despite the fact it is main access, like, access the entire
Mhm.
property. Um,
Hmm.
but within those 2 weeks, the first week, I think there were like four break-in attempts through that access point. Um, and that's not too out of the ordinary for that particular site. But one
Mhm.
of the funny things was I was complaining about it to my spirits, and like they just basically chewed me the fuck out. Like, okay, talk to the spirits assigned over the door. Like, why are you not doing this? Why are you being lazy about that? Right? You're complaining about this and having to deal with these breaking attempts all the time, but then you're not doing anything about it spiritually speaking. So why are you just bitching? Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
very, very good point. And on that basis, I started, you know, every night when I'd go down to double check the lock, right? Because my fixes were very provisional. They weren't, oh, I'm fixing the mechanism. It's I'm forcing it back into place, and it can
Mhm.
be brute force back open. But the second I started, paying respect, paying attention to the spirits of the door, addressing them directly, making a request for them, and on my lunch break or whatever, I'd be sharing a cigarette with them in exchange. Yeah, it was a quiet it was a quiet rest of the week until the door got fixed.
Hmm.
The yeah, it's like, and that's not so that just shows, right? It's not just spirits either. It's also people that can be attracted by. It sounds like I'm saying people are attracted by broken doors, which they are, but
They
the
are
misfortune
objectively
that
here.
arises from that
Mhm.
as well, right? Like
Hmm.
the symbolic nature of it as well is also going to, by natural sympathy, draw it in because I was in charge of monitoring that door. I was watching it constantly, and it wasn't even just because they weren't aware that these locks weren't working. That was the thing. Like people just try to get in regularly. They would try the door, realize it doesn't open, they give up. Like that's a lot, right? A lot of theft, a lot of break-ins are acts of opportunity, and people will poke around or scout out. But in this specific context, uh, you know, just having the spirits aware and helping out in that situation put off any attempts as well. So that's one of the things that's also worth considering is like, the security of the house isn't just going to impact the spiritual security, it's also going to impact the so-called mundane because these two things are really one and the same at the end of the day. Like if your
Mhm.
household is open, inviting unclean spirits, you're also at higher risk of people being an issue as well.
So keep it locked down, people. Come
Yeah.
on.
Do you do stuff for the door like the keyholes? Like do you have a particular wash that you do for that?
Yeah, usually because I'm a nerd, I will, when I take the lock apart and like do stuff to it or rekey it or whatever, I will pack like a little bit of stuff in there
Hmm.
at that point, but really just kind of the classics that we've already touched on this episode, like Dieffenbachios of different kinds, Dracaena Sansevieria, which is now also Dracaena. But anyway, powdering all those things down. You know, rosemary, lavender, the classics. Just kind of keeping that all together, and
Hmm.
also kind of the same deal with some of the lock-picking magic, assuming that a Toadman isn't walking by and just throwing his cap at my door and having it open.
Yeah, but you wish in your heart of hearts someone would try so you could fight them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like
I'm
you're just waiting for the dramatic moment where like someone finally nicks you and like a little tiny bit of blood comes out of your nose and into your lower lip and you lick it off and you go, "Ha, you got me." But now it means that I can fight back as hard as I want. And then you just go for it.
Yeah, it's like the theft story that we've told a couple times.
Oh my God, yeah, where like the guy tried to like rob your car
Mhm.
and then you made the exact culprit come back to the scene of the crime and get dragged into the circle you put on the floor. Like he literally like fell down and ate shit in it.
Mhm. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the
Yeah.
thing is like you're not there to curse him, you're there to physically beat him up.
Literally. It's how it goes, you know.
Hmm.
The best solution.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good to me. You know, like I said, I don't usually like do a completely separate wash.
Mhm.
But like I will definitely bathe the door handle a little bit. On certain saint days, I will pour out milk and wine
Mhm.
over the doorstep. At one point my parents visited me and they were like, "What's that stain on your front door?" And I was like, I literally threw milk and wine on this last night." And they were like, "Oh, okay, okay." And like they're like, "Fine, yeah, yeah." Or on Saint Haralampia's day, so that's Haralambos, we mark the door with a cross of honey because we consecrate honey for him. And we also, I have a Haralampos mini icon by my house spirit, and I also have
Mhm.
a bigger one on my icon corner. And so I have Haralambos and I have Stephen the First Murder or the Proto-Murder, Stefan Vetrovity by my house spirit for various divination reasons. And by the door, I have three particular saints that guard it, which I'm too smart to say out loud. You know?
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say them. But yeah, they are there, and they're also protected by three other female saints. So there's three male saints and three female saints. So yeah, there's you can keep all kinds of things. Again, if you love a 2D image like I do, there's so much you
Mhm.
can do.
Yeah, yeah. Like one of the classics that in Greece, going into every little market and seeing that St. George icon positioned above the door such that the spear is pointing right at it.
Yes, yes, always the spear. You'll notice. We were in Cyprus and we noticed that like at every random little market, like we went to get groceries, Kay and I, and we were like, oh, there's literally, and I mean literally, a Saint uh George icon over every door pointing towards the door.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I mean, mood.
Yeah. And just being clever with the positioning of the images like that. So
Hmm.
like if you have that statue, angle it a little bit so it's always watching the door, or hang that image so it's watching the door, or even more like dedicated feng shui like approaches to door facing and like how to remediate that, or like knowing how to keep that area projecting a certain energy, or directing the chi as it flows to be like, okay, we're having problems with the dead, so let's maybe get this metal going and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to note, right? Like we talked about Haralambos, and there'll be some Haralambos charms for me forthcoming soon. But there's a reason his image is used for Saint San Desasador, Saint
Mhm.
Undoer. So that's why he's at our doors to undo anything that could potentially harm us.
Mhm.
And we in Serbia call him the Gospodar svih bolesti. So he is the Lord of all diseases because he also unmakes all harms. And disease can come to the front door, right? Through your feet, through anything.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of the herbal washes that I will refresh my door with every month is for against disease. It's
Mhm.
also where I keep some things for some of my spirits in the ATRs that I train in to also protect against any kind of illness.
Mhm. Absolutely.
But love and Azar,
Yeah, Love
always.
and Azar.
I have a fat one
Mhm.
outside. It's really funny when people are coming and I'm like, they're like, which one is yours? Because like there's a number obviously, but sometimes people don't notice it, and I'm just like, just look for the giant Nazar. And then bells
Mhm.
that warn, like especially like door chimes, are actually really good to warn against evil spirits and to like scare them away.
Mhm.
And definitely again refreshing all these with like herbal washes.
Even during the like beyond just the refresh, like feeding the door directly, like
That's what I meant
the
with the milk and
Mhm.
honey, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
the wine. But also just like even putting some herbs, some dried herbs underneath the welcome mat, or like playing cards, talismans, that kind of thing. Or like if you're able, having some pots, like potted plants by your door that protect as well. Fucking again, love Espada de São Jorge.
Mhm. Yeah, love Komiko Nigampoji as well.
Yes, so good.
Dieffenbachia, and then sometimes even like Mass Cane or Dumb Cane or things like that. Just whatever it may
Hmm.
be.
Yeah. Yeah, Kumiko Ningenpoji is dumb cane, which literally makes your it numbs your tongue, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or even keeping a little pepper plant by the door. Such a good
Um,
point.
Such a good plant. I think an obvious part of house cleansing has to do with your actual shrine spaces.
Yeah.
Um, Give your spirits flowers, fragrant flowers that are pleasing to them, that can protect the shrine from impurity, and that the way that they wilt can act as omens of Malefica.
Hmm.
Houseplants can be a first line of defense where you'll see them, you'll notice when things are off. We have a great episode, So You Think You Can Ward, episode
Hmm.
13, where we talked a lot about different ways you can use words in your house. So does this obviously has a lot of like overlap with that episode. But one thing we talked about there is noticing that plants will be a visual indicator for you if something's off.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Especially, mhm. Especially when it comes to flowers that have been given as offerings, right? Because when you are given these offerings, they should, by all means, be lasting a little longer than they do naturally. And obviously, one of the big signs when their offerings are specifically wilting early is potentially risk of something going wrong with those offerings, right? And when that starts happening, then the entire system can fall apart because now you're not nourishing your spirits, you're not equipping them with the tools that they need to engage in the defense and the protection of the household and the driving out of spirits. So this is definitely something that I think needs to be monitored very carefully. Flowers, but also like offerings in general, right? Like monitoring your offerings to make sure that they're expiring or decomposing. Well, not decompose, you don't want them to decompose, right? But making
Hmm.
sure that everything's happening at its natural pace or preferably even longer, um, rather than like, immediately
Hmm.
becoming unclean or dirty.
Yeah.
And I think in that respect as well, like when we talk about the routine cleansing, right? Like when we are doing our weekly rituals, like purification of the shrine space specifically, because it is where we're doing a lot of our work, and potentially some of that work is messy. It's not necessarily pure, depending on the nature of our practices. That just makes, regular cleansing, regular purification of that space even more important, I think, especially during, like maybe every fortnight at least. But the most successful approach is to what I'm currently using is during my regular weekly rituals is or regular daily rituals is incorporating purificationary practices into those daily rites, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that can be as simple as a small recitation and sprinkling of holy water about the shrine space, altar purification recitations, that kind of thing, right? But
Mm.
yeah, I think these kind of like the thing with cleansing the house is that the best solution, the best approach is regular small amounts. I do find like making sure that there is routine in the practice of purification is one of the most important aspects of it. It's not, exceptional major cleansings are very useful. They're very good, especially when we do them seasonally or like during particular times where that's appropriate, like feasts, or
Yeah,
solstice
yeah.
movements, like lunar
Like generally
solstice.
there's like yeah, like there's always like a major seasonal saint day or holiday on any calendar that people inevitably clean up around to kind of prepare for the next season.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And those times are like the best optimal time, right? So it is always good to be hitting them. But
Hmm.
when we're doing it regularly, obviously we're making it's going to be easier during the big events, but also B, it's going to stop the minute accumulations that occur in between those times, right?
Hmm.
And it's also going to prevent you having to need to, you know, start doing heavy duty work outside of those times, right? Because if you leave your house for 2, 3 months and you start drawing in all these annoying, nasty spirits, it's going to be a pain in the ass. Now at this point, like there's a potential that you're not just going to get by with a regular cleanser. Now you're going to have to go full exorcism mode, right? Like we were talking about shoes earlier. Well, now you're going to have to stomp all over the house and start stamping on spirits. Like you're going to have to start burning, really nasty smelling fumigations instead of that sweet frankincense and myrrh blend, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. God knows those smell
Mhm.
nasty. And I think something to note there as well, just in general, this is why, again, you can make a lot of these cleansings a bit more easier to do. Like you make them more automated, like I mentioned, like having like just already jujued Castile soap
Mhm.
bottles, or having a spray that you add into a little spray bottle. I love that shit. Like sometimes I just go around and spray with it, and like that takes 2 seconds. Or
Mhm.
even like instead of fumating a shrine, I might just kind of like spray the air around them, and like the particles will fall down and refresh everything.
I mean, I think that's one of the big things, right? Is like when we're talking about folk magic, that doesn't mean it has to be this, fake cottagecore, like rural-esque ideal. Like you can use things that are chemical in nature, right? Like chemical cleaning products potentially have their own spiritual qualities. It's like folk medicine, right? Like sometimes box of paracetamol is part of the cure. Like,
Yeah, it is a reason
there's
Vicks VapoRub is so used, right? Including for
Mhm.
doors to protect, right? Camphor is the main ingredient.
exactly. And I think purity is very much the same in that regard. Like you don't, there's no reason, outside of materia not interacting well with each other. Like you mentioned this in regards to ammonia earlier in the episodes, Finger.
Hmm.
There obviously is cause to be wary of that, but there's also things that actuate that and support those more harsh chemical agents that do have their own spiritual qualities and virtues.
Hmm. It's
Yeah.
also like you know why you're adding something. So like adding urine, for example, to your floor wash is because you want to reassert your dominance over the space, but only in obviously small amounts. Is also one thing to consider, but you don't want to blend that with other chemicals, right?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Just like, yeah, one of the classic disclaimers. Don't mix the chemicals. Don't make fun chemistry happen in your mop bucket when you're trying to cleanse your house. You guys
Yeah,
know what you're doing.
yeah.
Tasty,
You
tasty chlorine gas.
no,
Mhm.
no. Keys had to save 20 people from that as an actual chemist.
Oh my God, yeah. It's too funny.
Hmm.
But yeah, like also just kind of that modality of like if you're gonna go in with the big guns and like really nuke a space of spirits and like clean it out or like really strongly cleanse off a person in your space, then like know to go back in and build something up in the void that you've just left behind, less to be filled by those spirits again.
Yes, absolutely.
It's always like the kind of the modality of if you go in with something really bitter or really purgative or really strong, nourishing, sweet, calming, cooling things can come in later to be like, hey, now that this pathogen's out, here's the metaphysical band-aid for whatever that problem was, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
precisely. You just, again, keep your spirits close, keep the other spirits
Mhm.
out.
gotta wash
Yeah,
it.
And
absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah. And, have your tools, right? Like I have certain things that I use for this. I have consecrated machetes, I have consecrated brooms, that kind of thing. Magical tools, right? The key loves shears and scissors.
That I do, yeah. And always, keep pairs around, leave them open on top of the overturned water glass of art. You can, even hanging them above the door.
Yeah,
Um,
I have a set of sheep shears linked to the Gospodar Vukova, the Master of the Wolves, because we refer to the wolf jaws as anything that closes over sheep. So barn doors can be wolf jaws, or sheep shears can be wolf jaws, anything that closes over them. And this sometimes I place at my door when I need extra boosts.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
when it comes to tools as well, there's also like the routine plays a role again, right? Because like when you're using the same bowl over and over again to purify and wash the house, right, it's going to start accumulating those properties, even if you haven't given it a formal consecration. It's still a participant in the purificationary process, and through that repeated many, many uses, right? I mean, this is how I'd say most tools, when you're talking about like folk magic specifically, tend to be consecrated is just by regular use. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and in that same respect, right, then we get to the point where, hey, this regular fucking wooden bowl that I bought for £2.50 at the local corner shop, well, now it's spiritualized, it's consecrated, it's empowered, and I don't even need to put herbal material necessarily inside of it. Obviously, I still want to,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I don't have to necessarily if I'm, in a real situation and a real pinch because it's so extensively used at this point that just regular water being put in there is gonna, you know, attain some of those qualities, some of those properties that we've been using it for over and over again. And so in that respect, like that also speaks to the benefits that arise from a regular routine in this kind of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of, I remember even talking about that in like the Hagstone episode where it's like, how do you consecrate the Hagstone? I don't know. You just hang it up and then it's been the thing that's protected your family for 50 years. So it might as well keep working tomorrow, right?
I love in the Hagstone episode where we mentioned like families that pass their Hagstones on to each other and it's said to accumulate power each generation that it gets passed on to. I have so many Hagstones that I'm excited to when they pass on to my children and be like, this is yours.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
This is the hagstone that's tied to a piece of string. I swing it around, I hit spirits with it.
Yeah,
It'll
it
be
made the
one that
whoop whoop
protects
whoop whoop
you.
whoop sound when I did it.
Oh man.
David,
The Hagstone clad bull roar of art.
Mhm.
speak
Will
of
this conjure the storm or avert it? Let's find out.
Whatever I so please.
Hmm.
But I love a magic bowl for holding spiritual waters.
yeah.
That gets consecrated through use. I'm a big fan of just they're consecrated because they're used for it.
Hmm.
To the point that over time, Salt and I were talking about this a little before we started recording, like it'll just start actually blessing things automatically when you pour things in there, even regular water.
Oh yeah.
I have a dedicated pitcher for this.
Hmm.
Hmm. Listen,
It's
you can even go full fancy, right? Like you can even add some semi-precious stones to the bowls, belonging to, the four elements, for example, or something along those lines.
hmm
Like having different bowls for different functions, right?
yeah.
Like there's
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
many.
Hmm.
It's one of those things. It's just so much options, so much room.
Totally, totally. And so I think, Salt was mentioning earlier their practice of routine versus heavy cleansings. Like I do one on Epiphany, I do one on New Year's Eve, I do one on Christmas Eve, all these very like shortly after each other kinds of cleansings and boostings. I do one on Sretenje, on Blah, the English please. It's Candlemas, right? It's the meaning of the Lord. I just celebrate on the 15th of February as opposed to the 2nd. And then, additional things for Haralambos, additional things for St. George, for St. Vitus, for Elijah's Day, Ogina Maria, all this other kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, there's all kinds of things to do, right? And I
Hmm.
would say that figure out your calendar, figure out what feels good to you, and just incorporate a routine that's not stressful to you. It should feel fun. It should feel like, oh, I get to just do this now. And incorporate some kind of food offerings with it. I love Salt's idea of using the breadcrumbs that were baked in the oven as a kind of sprinkle as well. And
Hmm.
just know when you need a full exorcism, like, when you want to call a priest over literally, or when you just want to kind of have a more gentle cleansing. But this is not to be a paranoid, hygienic person about it. It's just to say that, like, you shower regularly, hopefully, right? I don't know. It's a podcast for occultists. We don't know. We don't know. I don't want to assume. I've been to some conferences and I no, never mind. I'm good. I'm good. Um, anyway, what I was trying to say was, you clean off regularly, ish, and as you do so, listen, all I'm trying to say is we all know that one guy who's like, I do Goetia, and the like eyes are twitching as I say it, and you're like, bro, deodorant. Um, it's not just, you don't need to be the stank box that you imprison the demons in. You could just smell like normal. I'm like nervously extending them like one of
Hmm.
those Old Spice like shower gels, like very nervously as like a 19-year-old getting into a cult community. So like, please, this is for you.
Hmm.
Don't be mad. Anyway, God, I'm so traumatized. But I would say you should definitely still obviously be cleaning your space and just feel this doesn't have to be a special spiritual ceremony. This can just be part of your regular cleansing routine. Whenever you vacuum, whenever you mop,
Hmm.
this is just part of it. People who grew up in spiritist families or around Orisha know how to do this like the back of their hands because they grew up in it. Like this is like very normal for them. Everyone I know who comes from a family of spiritists is like always like, oh my God, we gotta mop, we gotta do this. They will bring their own Colonial 1-800 with them when they're traveling.
Hmm.
I think, Key, we both know who we're talking about right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah, we love him, love him, love him. If you're
Hmm.
listening to this, we love you. Because it's just so, so excellent. And you're just like, great, this is already nice and empowered. And otherwise, I mean, I just love the sensation. This is very sensory to me, but with like pouring out a mop bucket onto my front doorstep, I'm like, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's always great. You're like, I did the thing.
Yeah. Random ambient dead going like,
Hmm.
no, as they like go into the drain.
Hmm.
And speaking of ambient dead, Key, I believe you have something to offer for those who live with roommates, partners, non-magical friends, alone, any combination of living arrangements that might be dealing with random dead passing by and being like, "What are you doing?"
Hmm. That I do. It's just cooking some stuff up in the background that happened to align nicely with the topic of today's episode, which is some little charms against the ambient dead.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ultimately, these are tiny, made to be just, tucked away somewhere in the environment or kept on the person if you're going to be, walking through like haunted building or a cemetery or something like that. Not to work it, just passing through. We don't want to be that abrasive, but really, this is just a matrix of a bunch of different powders and many of the herbs that we spoke about in today's episode that are again mixed with some earths from different places, such as a cemetery gate, a church, um, a fence, things like that, walls of different locations. But really, this is just to keep those little fragmentary larvae or astral parasites, whatever we want to call them, well away from you. As this episode goes out, they are available. So if anyone's interested, you can check that out.
Yeah, with cunningcommand.com is where you
Hmm.
can find all our merch, as it were. Keep your eyes peeled for some St. Hannah health charms coming from me shortly.
Hmm.
Everyone in the Patreon Discord server gets first dibs. So if you want to hear a little
Very
bit more
true.
about the background of how they're being made and so on, and like what's the kind of vibe of them, what went into them, we will obviously post that in all the descriptions. But patrons get a little extra preview.
Hmm. And
And you,
they have indeed heard about it before the episode goes live. So for
hmm
future things, if you are so enticed, feel free
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
drop in.
Indeed. Well, thank you, boys. This was really fun. I hope this gives people some nice things to do. Just like, again, a general advice episode is something that we get a lot of requests for. So we're doing more of those, but we'll have some more research ones available too as well soon, because we do miss doing them. And it's been really, really
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. It was a very fun one, and hopefully, as people try things out, let us know what you do. Let us
Yeah,
know
totally.
how you're keeping it locked down, and we can all implement and improve those protections together.
Indeed. Um, I have a ridiculous Akash record for today.
Mhm.
It's Slater's Purr. Because this is the first track on my cleaning my house playlist, which is a ridiculous, like kind of trashy pop, like hyper pop playlist. That's just like nasty, but like I play this one because it makes me go fast. I have a friend who was like, "Oh, you actually do move faster when this is playing." And it does because I clean my house top to bottom really quickly on this. Whenever I'm having guests or like you're driving up from the States Key, like I'm like whoa, 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 to this exact song. Floor wash
Mhm.
makes the dried kitty under my doorstep go purr.
Oh man, what a perfect catch record.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm glad you appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, today my Akashic record is Atlantis Danger Zone by the Klaxons.
I have seen you in person dissect a shark, a small shark, but a shark nonetheless, to the song.
Yeah. This is a song that is one that has just been on enough playlists that have been playing while I'm making ridiculous protection juju.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's just forever associated, It's just one of those songs where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably doing magical. This is on.
yeah. Amazing. And License to Depart is actually an English Orthodox prayer said after the blessing of a house. Um, Once the priest has finished blessing the house and done his prayers and his asperging and his incense fumigations, this may conclude. And normally you'd include the names of those living and also those who live here but are absent. But here we're just going to read a more general version of it.
O Lord God, our Savior Jesus Christ, who was baptized in the Jordan by John, and who entered the home of Zacchaeus, bringing salvation to his habitation. Do you, O Lord, bless this home, keep safe from harm all those who live here, and also those who are absent. Fulfill their good desires, grant them your blessings of bodily and spiritual well being, protection from visible and invisible dangers, and all their petitions which are unto salvation and life eternal. For you are our God, and to you we ascribe glory and honor, with your Father, who is without beginning, and the holy, good, and life creating Spirit, now and ever, unto the ages of ages. Amen.
You can create like goodie bags for spirits, right? Like, oh, here's your favorite incense, or like here's your favorite little like candy, like spirits love candy,
Mhm.
right? Here's your favorite little charm. And then the same thing for cultists, where it's just like here's an Axe body spray. Here's here's an Old Spice shampoo. Here's a comb. Here's a beard oil.
The only thing stinkier than a graveyard spirit is a magician.